Welcome to this video about the 6th round of the Chess Olympiad in Istanbul. This is a bit late because I was traveling back from my vacation place back home, so I'm back home with my usual equipment. But this is why this video about a game that has been played on Monday is only on Wednesday, so I'll need a day to catch up here. 6th round was played, as mentioned, 2 days ago on Monday, and it saw a big clash of the favorites between Russia and Armenia. And this is, of course, very much important for the further course of the tournament if this match had a winner. In fact, it ended in a tie to 2 against 2, and we had 2 draws played on board 3 and 4, and Sergei Movsesian beat Alexander Grishuk in a very complicated game. And on board 1 we had Vladimir Kramnik playing against Levon Aronian, which is also the game I'll be featuring here, simply because of its sport, pure importance in terms of the standings, but also because it was an interesting game. In the other matches we had a hard-fought 2-2 of United States against Germany, 4 draws, and I think it was very correct match. It looked like that at no point any player would have had a decisive advantage which has been spoiled or anything. It was pretty much within the drawing margin. Azerbaijan beat Croatia 3-1 very convincingly, with Rajabov and Mamedyarov scoring. Spain beat the Czech Republic 2.5, 1.5, and in an upset the Philippines beat Bulgaria 2.5 to 1.5 with 3 draws, and Grandmaster Barbosa beating Kirill Georgiev, pretty much a win of an outsider, slight outsider at least. And also it must be said that Georgiev was clearly winning, but spoiled it near the end from a winning to a losing position. So an interesting round, but let's look at the game here between Kramnik and Aronian. We start off with 1d4 as expected, and we have the Slav defense. Kramnik plays knight c3 and Aronian knight f6, all the normal moves, and now you would expect mostly knight f3 or maybe e3 from Kramnik, leading to a Moran line here, or possibly also, if he would play sharper, this, the semi-Slav, probably followed by h6. This has been debated in their match in, I think it was April this year. This kind of line they played in game 1, where Kramnik actually suffered one of his very rare losses with white. But in this game, Kramnik played the exchange variation, which is very rarely played at top level or grandmaster level, simply because it is thought to be a bit too harmless. But the positive side of this line, certainly especially in a team event, is that it is super safe. White can really play for some very little pull without any risk, so it's not a bad choice for a team match. A loss with white, for instance, on board 1 is pretty much a disaster. Now bishop f4. It must be said that the exchange variation has some finer points to it. For instance, in this kind of move order where white plays the early bishop f4, it is a bit different to playing this kind of exchange variation, where all knights are already developed. We can see that in the game bishop f4, this knight stays back on g1, and this is really a difference, because sometimes knight e2 comes into consideration. White tries with this move order to have some more options, but it also offers black additional possibilities. In this position, black, for example, has the very interesting move queen to b6, which is a very good idea to play if you want to stir up a bit of trouble as black, as you simply attack this pawn and also put a bit of pressure on the d4 pawn. In fact, all moves that cover the pawn are a bit meek. I mean, you don't want to put the queen on d2. It's simply not such a great square. And how else would you cover it? This has two possible problems. One is this, but this is interesting for white, maybe even. But also black could take and damage your pawn structure, and it's not so even anymore. It offers black some ideas to play for win. In fact, the best move here is rook c1, and black can in fact snatch this pawn, and it leads to quite complicated, unclear position. But Aronian didn't play this; he just played knight c6, and yeah, stayed solid. e3 now. And in this position, black can play moves that lead to the main lines, where white plays knight f3 later, or he can play some independent options. In fact, Aronian decided for a6 in this position. But black here also has other ideas. He could play, besides queen b6, it's still possible. He could also play this move, which is interesting, which in fact I played myself a couple of times when I had this position. It simply, well, yeah, attacks the queen, and white would need to make moves that he not necessarily wants to make. It is very important to know that a move like knight f3 is very toothless, as black very much enjoys this exchange. He wants to exchange this knight and gets rid of his somewhat problematic bishop. In general, knights are better in this kind of position than bishops, so want to get rid of this piece. So knight f3 isn't a good move, really. What white needs to play is either this one, or more enterprisingly f3, attacking this bishop. And if black would go here, you can even consider gaining more space with g4, which leads to quite interesting positions. It's not really drawish. Black can also just drop back to d7, which is what I usually played, and well, just claimed that this is a weakness. But here also white can play stuff like g4, and you see that the exchange is not always about exchanging all the pieces and making a draw. This is quite interesting. Okay, but Aronian played the move a6, which is also rather popular. It's a bit of a waiting move. Black simply wants white to play knight f3 and then play bishop g4 and equalize. But of course white doesn't do this. He plays bishop g3. And yeah, now what should black do? He cannot play this natural move. It simply hangs. Of course, I need to mention black can also simply play the symmetrical stuff. It's the dullest of all, but you can do it. Okay, so a6, bishop d3. Here black also has more than one option. Aronian actually played a somewhat lesser known line. He played here g6, which is rather uncommon in this kind of structure, because the fianchetto is very often not such a great idea. The main move probably is still bishop g4, which is somewhat similar to the earlier bishop g4 that I just showed. Black can also fall back to this plan and just play bishop e7, castles, and so on, which is slightly passive but still playable. It's not so terrible with this bishop. It's not so active, of course, but it's playable. Yeah, well, he played g6, and the idea is, obviously, you can see this. Kramnik now played h3. This is designed again against this idea. So, oops, this was a bit too quick. h3 is just to prevent this bishop g4 idea. And now Aronian played bishop f5. This was obviously the idea of g6 to support this bishop f5 move. And here I very much expected Kramnik to take on f5, which he didn't do, surprisingly. It's not that I think it's terrible for black, but I expected him to take here to somewhat weaken black's pawn structure. But it's not a very, very weak extra pawn. Cannot really claim that. But It would have been simply a different pawn structure. He didn't care much though about this idea. He just continued knight f3, and yeah, black exchanged and played bishop g7. Yeah, white castles, black castles, all very, very normal moves. And now rook f2 c1. White wants to play on the c file, obviously. This is the only open file. And he also takes the f rook because possibly this rook is useful on a1, while the rook on f1 never has any decent idea on e1 or d1. fc1 is normal. Yeah, and how to assess this position? Obviously, it is quite symmetrical, but one very important difference here is that black has got this fianchettoed bishop, which is biting on this d4 pawn and it's doing nothing. And this bishop actually has some ideas, possibly supporting something on c7, avoiding rook b8 moves, queen c7 moves. So this bishop is exerting slight pressure, while this bishop on g7 is not doing so much. The other slight problem that black has is this pawn structure. I think I need to get rid of most of this here. This pawn structure is a slight problem because it has weakened the dark squares. So knight coming to c5, we also see that black now played e6, knight a4. We see now that this knight on c5 is a possible nuisance, attacking these pawns. And this is why this pawn structure is sometimes a slight problem. By the way, e6 is a move that you could also question if you look at it as first, because it weakens the dark squares even more. But it's a good move still because of the plan that black employs in the game. He wants to reroute the bishop to f8 and get it possibly exchanged. So e6 prepares this. Knight e4, also good. Why not? Occupy the center. And now Kramnik went knight to c5. So we had this exchange, which yeah, just sped up White's White's doubling on the c file. White is quicker on the c file. It's still very solid for black, but still the c file is something. Black played queen d7, certainly useful, connecting the rooks. Rook to c1, rook f to c8. It all looks very logical and still quite harmless for black. a6 now, a3, sorry. Yeah, this is to prevent any kind of ideas like this, and also of course to prepare b4 to support the queenside expansion. Yeah, black played bishop f8. As mentioned, this was the idea of the e6 move. Yeah, a retreat to c2. And now the move f6. This wasn't strictly necessary really, but it's okay. He wants to prevent any knight jumps to e5. In fact, black could have played this kind of move. He possibly didn't want to have this kind of position where white brings this knight to e5, but it's maybe not such a big deal. This kind of position still should be relatively equal. Still f6 is not a mistake. It's perfectly all right. Yeah, knight d2, also quite logical. The idea is, oops, not this, not within the rules. Now, of course, knight to b3, to c5, or possibly to a5. So it's all very logical what white is doing in this game. We also see that Kramnik had a rather huge time advantage. This is yeah, understandable because his moves are very very obvious what white is doing, while black is yeah, also not under huge pressure, but he needs to be careful that that he doesn't somehow play some inaccurate move and really gets into trouble. So bishop b6, exchanging, and knight here. Yeah, and in this position, it is actually very critical, this position. It doesn't look like it, but it is critical. It's quite funny. This is the exact position that was shown during the live broadcast of the tournament. and the live broadcast means they have got video coverage and a grandmaster commentator, and the English commentary is done by I think it's Ukrainian. If you have Geny Miroshnichenko, it's a very strong grandmaster rated above 2,600 ELO. And in this case, he actually had a guest commentator, which is top women player Anna Muzichuk. And Muzichuk was asked by Miroshnichenko what she would play in this position. And she suggested the move b6, which really looked, to my eye, rather strange, I must admit, because it looks like it weakens this pawn on a6, so you cannot move this rook at any point, because it's simply always hanging. And I thought, well, what a weird suggestion. But in fact, if you look at this position somewhat closer, you will actually find that this is the only playable move, really. If Black wants to avoid to get under really big pressure, Black actually must play this move. There is no big big alternative. The thing is, what he did in the game, let's show this. He played rook c7, and now Kramnik played knight to a5. And this is actually a pretty interesting move. Also, when I looked at the live broadcast, I was only or mostly thinking about this move, because somehow this looks like an inviting square, putting pressure on all these pawns. But knight a5 is simply the stronger move, because it puts such a big pressure on c6. And not only on c6, there's also a second threat, and this threat is actually the far more problematic one. It's knight takes b7. And what should Black do about this move? The problem is there is nothing he can do. It's simply after this move that Black is, I think, basically lost. Rook c7 looks perfectly normal, but he must have overlooked some kind of tactical detail after knight a5. We see what happens in the game. He played rook to c8, and there is nothing better. Simply, you have no other great moves. You can play let's say queen d7 if you want, just to put something out on the board. But here White can also just take. It's just the same. Something like this. White has the choice. He can take here, or he can play rook c7, and both are really ugly. You don't want to have this kind of position with White having the rook on the 7th rank, which has been severely weakened. So it's really basically over after this move. So he must have miscalculated something. One possible point of miscalculation we can see in a couple of moves. So rook c8 was played, knight takes, rook takes, and queen a6. He certainly saw this one, and now this knight is under attack. It cannot move, so Black has only this move. And here b4. This was the whole idea. It's a terrible cross pin on the c file, and against this queen on d6. He played queen d7. Very logical, unpinning this queen at least. And maybe, just a speculation, he only calculated b5 in this position, which Kramnik didn't play. If b5, this is actually a position that isn't 100% clear. Let's say knight e7. It's also very dangerous, obviously. We can see this, because White can capture here. And he still has these pawns. So this is probably also very good for White, but it's not immediately winning the game. What Kramnik played, queen b6, was far stronger, simply attacking this rook on c7 and now really threatening b5 with devastating effect. This is simply over now. What should Black do? In the game he played queen back to e8. We can look at other moves. Let's say rook b8. This is actually severely punished with this line. And yeah, black simply has no moves. This knight is close to getting lost. Let's say he goes here. But, really, it gets really ugly really quickly. And here there are multiple moves. You can play b5 and kill this knight, or also rook e7 is also terrible, threatening mate. And yeah, black simply gets destroyed here. There's nothing to do. What else? Let's say this move. White can take here.
Check.
And regains the queen with the winning position. So it's just a case of deadly pins. Pin and win, yeah. Okay, he played queen e8, b5. And now black has final little trick, knight takes d4. And yeah, but we see that Kramnik has calculated everything perfectly. Now took on c7.
Check.
This check, slight point here. King moves to the side. Knight takes on c1. This was the last little idea that black had, but white just takes. Yeah, it is temporarily a piece down even, but the combination of b-pawn and the queen against the stranded knight is simply too strong. White just plays this move, very strong. Winning a tempo on the queen, black cannot take it. The pawn simply promotes after this. So black needs to move the queen. He went to d8. And now simply this one, not even bothering to take the knight. You can simply promote the b-pawn now. Yeah, black has nothing. Played this one.
Check.
Queen c7 check. Here, queen a7, yeah, and now the pawn just promotes. And here Aronian resigned. White gets a new queen next move. Yeah, so you can see with the exchange variation, there's still a little bit of poison in this. Basically one move, this rook c7 move in this position, yeah, it simply lost the game, amazingly. So, as pointed out by Musichuk in the broadcast, black must play b6. And after b6, it's very, very slightly better for white, but black has still good chances to hold this. I think he would have a little bit of time to consolidate his position. We can look at this briefly. So not this move, so b6. So what should white do? One possibility would be to try to triple on the c-file, let's say here, and then black can play something like this, queen d7, queen c2 if white tries this, and then knight e7. The idea being, if white tries to enter on the 7th, you can also go here, and this is nothing. Black is, I think, about equal here. Yeah, also note that this b6 pawn really made this knight look a bit silly, because it simply has no points of entry now. I think after b6 it's very likely that Aronian would have managed to hold this position. But rook c7 was really yeah, a big mistake out of a very innocuous looking position. Yeah, this little move really lost the game. Yeah, so a nice win here for Kramnik. And it also obviously was very important for the team, as Grishuk lost on board too, so they made a tie at the end. Yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll be back very soon with round 7 to catch up with the coverage of the Istanbul Olympiad.